Hey guys, we're at Zoe Guitars. Are we in Oceanside?
Yes, we are.
This is Oceanside.
It says Oceanside Ceramics.
Oh yes, Oceanside Ceramics and Zoe Guitars. And we're going to do a tour of their facility and nerd out with them about guitar stuff. That's right?
Yes, we are.
I'm excited.
Sean Weimer is one of the premier guitar luthiers on the planet, and we're really lucky to spend some time with him.
Okay.
So there's probably about, if you start, there's about 70 questions that we kind of get into. And some of them kind of take a while because it all starts with the soundboard, the top wood. So this is actually a student, he'll be in here in a little bit. So this is his. And so typically it's two pieces, almost always two pieces. But the sound basically comes from that. And we kind of begin there because we kind of find out like who plays, of course. Yeah, all right, so like what kind of stuff? So let's use it as an example.
So I'm a hobbyist guitar player. I like to play steel string blues with my friend who plays harmonica.
Okay, with a flat pick.
Yeah.
So you like to be loud, you like to, okay, so cool. So that's great beginning. That tells me a lot of information right there because if you said, you know, I'm more of a folky, I finger pick with the pads of my fingers, I'm going to say, okay, then Engelmann spruce is perfect for you. So it doesn't matter about volume because Sitka spruce it's huge volume. And so with Engelmann spruce, the volume isn't there, but the wood allows you to pick up the subtle nuances of finger picking. And so it articulates those quiet little noises really well where Sitka won't do that. So if you're a flat picker and you want to be loud, Sitka is the way to go. And so the second thing is, so I would imagine if you're in blues, you're going to be doing a lot of bending.
Yeah.
So now we're on to the scale of the guitar, which is, you know, a little bit down the line. But the scale of the guitar, so there's all these different scales. And they're basically lengths of how long the strings are from.
Yeah, like a Gibson is different than a Strat.
Exactly. And there's so many different ones. So this part right here is called the nut. And so when the strings cross that, that's where the beginning of the scale starts. And it goes all the way to the white piece right there. And when they cross that, that's the end of the scale. And so the longer the scale, the more string tension and harder to bend. So if you shorten the scale, for blues players, you have a shorter scale, way easier to bend.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
same sound and everything, but it's way easier to bend because there's way less string tension. So for you, I would say Sitka top and a short scale right off the bat. And then we kind of go from there.
Okay.
And so I think about probably 80 to 85% of the voice of the final product is going to come from this top. And then the back and sides flavor that top by about 15 to 20%.
I see the bracing in there. I have a question about bracing that came from my brother who's a really technical guitarist. And he said, with all the possible layouts for bracing, how do you decide and do you give the client a choice?
No. No, because typically no one asks those questions.
Okay.
They want, so the bottom line, so the idea about bracing is, so you have this Sitka or whatever you decide. I mean, you can use Western red cedar. There's all different types of spruces. There's redwood. There's all these different tops. Cedar is one of my favorite, and that's the guitar that you were playing, that cedar top. It's crisp and warm right off the bat, where Sitka, so this is what Sitka looks like, fairly freshly cut.
And that's old wood, right?
Yeah, so that's a whole other conversation that we probably should have at some point. Let me grab a piece. So Sitka spruce, without it, we wouldn't have a lot of acoustic guitars. So Sitka spruce only grows on a really thin strip of land between kind of Alaska and Washington State. It's right next to the ocean, and that's the only place in the world.
Wow.
And so old growth Sitka, so this is a piece of old growth Sitka. So whoever wants to feel the how rigid it is and how light it is.
Oh yeah.
It's ridiculously strong.
You can make an airplane out of that.
They have.
That's
The
what-
Spruce Goose.
Spruce.
Yeah.
Howard Hughes Spruce
He's
Goose.
an airplane guy too.
Oh, yeah, so my dad was too. He worked for McDonnell Douglas for a
Wow.
lot of years, and so in World War II they built the B-24 main frame out of Sitka spruce.
Yeah, wow.
So they understood how strong it is, and so the problem is, just like everything else in the world, we're overcutting it.
Are you worried about getting?
We got about 4 years left of old growth, and so
Oh jeez.
so here, that's new growth.
Look how far apart the
Exactly.
rings are.
So
Wow.
the strength from the wood comes from those dark lines. And so when you can,
Nice.
so compare that, we'll put them right next to each other. So here's an old growth.
Look how.
And so look at the
spaces
growth
are.
on this one.
Wow, yeah.
That's what we're getting on most production guitars now. And so it's a way weaker piece of wood. And so this is way stronger. And so the whole way that the whole entire scientific idea about how to get sound out of an acoustic guitar is this top has to vibrate. And if you don't get the top to vibrate, you're going to have weird tones. It's not going to be as loud. So the whole point is to get the top to vibrate. And so to do that, I remember we got strings on there. So there's 180 pounds of tension trying to pull that bridge off.
Wow.
And so you have to brace it. You can't just have this thin top. You know, that's really
Right.
thick. It'll get sanded down from that. But it's pretty thin. You can see it on the edge there. And so there's no way that that bridge will hold strings without bracing. So that gets us to bracing. So when you flip it over, these are all the components for this particular model. And so this is old growth spruce. And so the whole idea of being able to allow this top to vibrate is to take these braces down by scalloping them to as low as you
no
possibly can while still holding string tension so that doesn't pop off. So that's the whole trick. So typically production guitars, I think I have an example. Where did I put it? Oh, I glued it on
So
yesterday.
Taylor has a V class and Martin has a forward shift bracing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is based on C.F. Martin's early stuff where he was brilliant in what he did, and it's called X bracing. So that's a version of X bracing, and some of it. So all of this wood, how it's carved like that, that's called scalloping. And sometimes you scallop and sometimes you don't. So typically in smaller guitars, they don't have as much top, so they need a little bit more reinforcement, and so you don't do as much scalloping. But the whole idea, so when you scallop like that, you're basically tuning the top. And so when you start, and the top is really like this, we're going to start bracing this one fairly soon. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, and one of them is using deflection readings. And so we want to know how much that's going to bend. And so we can take some deflection readings and see, as we take this wood off, we want to see how strong it still is, because it still has to be pretty strong. But you felt this piece of wood. You can, I mean, that's a lot of wood, and it's still insanely light. But you'll hear it. So another way to do it is you can hear it. So you start doing taps. And so you can hold it with 2 fingers, and when you get it close, it just sits there and does this. And you
rings like a
can,
bell.
it kind of does. I mean,
Like
you
a
gotta.
thunder sheet.
It really, yeah, exactly.
Cool.
And so when you get the bracing close, you can take some deflection readings to make sure you haven't went too far, like I did on that one up there a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, the whole idea is you want to take this bracing down as low as possible, because the more you do, the more that top's going to vibrate. And if you leave it too much, which a lot of production guitars do, they become very trebly. Very thin sounding, and that's part of the problem. But I get it; it's a business decision, because what they don't want on the back end is warranty. You know, like half the guitars they sell to come back and say, "Man, my bridge fell off because you guys took the bracing down too far." So they typically don't do any scalloping at all, or very little. So they never really push the potential of the top. And when you do, you know, it takes time. It takes probably a couple hours to hand tune and finalize all the bracing, but when you do, it just vibrates.
Wow.
And then you can take it a step farther. And so I've got an artist back east, and he plays a lot of his stuff in a Capo 3G. And so, and that's just where his voice.
G tuning.
No, not just G chord.
Capo on the 3rd fret, and he plays the G chord.
Yeah, and that's just
like
where his voice lines up. And so what we did is we taught. So what are the 3 notes in a G chord? G, was it B? You're a piano player. G, B, D, I think it is. Yeah. And so you can tune the top to a G, the sides to a B, and the back to a D. And then when you hit that G chord, it just has an extra pop.
So you're tuning this to a note kind of like a drum.
Yeah, you don't do it a whole lot because just people don't want that extra time and effort being put into their build, and so but it adds quite a few hours when you do that. But when you tune it to a note that they play all the time, it just when they hit that G chord or whatever it is, it can be in any chord. It really pops.
That leads me to a question about your website where you say you match the tone woods to the player. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, part of it was just asking you a couple of basic questions like, what do you play? What, and then we'll get into stuff like what range? Where do you do a lot of capoing? Do you do slide? Where there's a lot of different questions with players. Like one of them is. So a lot of people don't even know that you can do a really cool thing. So on this fretboard, it's really hard to see, but it's actually curved. So it's radius.
It's got a radius.
Yeah.
Right.
And so generally speaking, the more radius it is, the easier it is to play chords. And the flatter it is, the easier it is to play leads.
Right.
And so what you can do, since most players play chords down here, and then when they go up the neck, so you can go compound radius. So you start round here, and then as it goes up the neck, flatten it out.
Wow.
So when they're getting up here, it's flat, so they can rip on the leads. And so that's one cool thing that you can do to accommodate people who do both chords and leads. But if you're just a chord player and you're flat picking and you never bend or anything, then that leads us down one road. But if you're bending and playing blues and playing leads, then that takes us down a different direction. So there's a lot, and honestly, you can't have it all with one guitar.
They say the same thing about airplanes. They're all a compromise. Everything is a compromise. Weight, power, fuel, everything, because like with a guitar, you can't have it play leads and chords.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
like when we first got. What's that?
It's like microphones too.
Yeah, totally. Like a Neumann 87. And how do you say it, Neumann?
Yeah.
Do you dry out your wood, or do you ever use?
It's all the people I used to, but all the people I source from now, they do it.
They do it.
Yeah.
And how about?
So when it gets here, I typically let it sit 1 to 2 years. So
it's aged.
Yeah, well, not only age, but continually to get acclimated to my area. Because I don't want to build with something that's not acclimated. Like if I get something, if I get like a weird special build and they want some, like this one. This wood is 52,000 years old.
Wow.
And,
For real?
So it's called Kauri, Kauri, I believe it is. And I got a request from a guy doing a tribute guitar for his son that had passed away. And so he had a sailboat, and on the sailboat had Kauri cabinets. And I'm like, man, what is Kauri? I've never heard of Kauri. I've never built with Kauri. Is it even a tone wood, and how do you get it? So after all this research, I found out that 52,000 years ago on the coast of New Zealand, this tsunami hit. And it wiped out these massive, ancient, huge trees that only grew on the coast of New Zealand and buried them under like 30, 40 feet of muck and peat moss and everything else. And they've been perfectly preserved. So now these farmers in New Zealand are plowing their fields and hit something. And they're like, dig it up and find this ancient old tree.
Wow.
And so it's called Kauri. And so they carbon dated it to 52,000 years. So the guitar he chose was a Kauri for the back and sides, and the top was also an ancient Sitka that was carbon dated to 1440 BC. And so the story on this one guitar is just, I'd show it to you, but it's he's just about to pick it up. I just finished it, but anything that gets close, I take it home.
What does something like that run?
It's hard to price something like that because he lost his son, and I'm not gonna rip someone off so I gave him a great deal. Yeah. Cool. So Yeah, every guitar is uniquely priced, and it's tough to come up with prices sometimes, especially for that. I've never built with it before, and that's actually why I got this piece from the supplier up in Minnesota who imports it. I was like, man, you got to send me some extra wood. So I was calling everyone trying to get information. How does it bend? What heat? What range? Any humidity? What do you got to do? And so the first piece I put on bent like butter. It got out, and I was like, okay, this is amazing, because you never get a bend. I mean, it's just beautiful. And so a lot of times, especially with figured wood, they tend to crack. And I mean, you can see this has been in the ground for 52,000 years, but if you pull at it, it just snaps.
Yeah,
there's not much integrity to it. So it had to be braced more than typical other woods. That seems so disrespectful, throwing a piece of away, a splinter away that's 52,000 years old.
So how about finish?
Yeah, that's man. You could go on for a week on this, and so
Nitro versus what's the other one?
No, there's a bunch. There's polyester UV. There's nitro. There's French polish. There's water base, and I got to take a minute to get Jacob going over there. So Jacob's got this guitar going on here that we were just talking about, and so he comes in about once a week and learning how to build from start to finish, so building his own. So yeah, so it's finish, man. It takes that's probably the hardest part of all of it, to get a glass perfect finish. I've got a guitar in the booth there that it's on its third respray. Just sometimes, there's like, you get it all done, you buff it on the machines, and you look at it and you're like, no, man, one tiny little sinkhole or something. It's just like pinhole. It's like, nope, it's got to go back in, so it's got to be resprayed. But yeah, finish is a whole different ball of wax, because if you said what's the perfect finish out there, most people can't afford it, because it takes about a month to do.
Really?
And it's French polishing. So with linseed oil and shellac. And you take a cotton ball and you dip a little bit of linseed oil with a little bit of shellac, and you start doing little circles.
So it's old school.
Oh, it's from the 16th, 15th century.
Yeah.
That's what they put on violins.
Yeah.
From France. And so they just start doing these little circles, and you just build up and build up and build up and build up, coat after coat after coat, to get this insanely thin but very protective finish that allows the top to just open up.
And that's the key, right? Is the finish.
Yeah,
can't
to not
dampen.
finish thick enough. Yeah, there's like a perfect finish out there that people say, and it's like 0.053 of an inch or something like that. It's like 53 thousandths of an inch.
Wow.
It's like, I don't know how they measure it, but I mean, I've got micrometers and I've tried to measure it, but
And you're talking about your flawed cover. It's kind of trendy now to have a pre-aged guitar. What do you think about that?
They do it. I bought one actually one time, and I thought it was pretty cool, because it was like built in like 2001, and I bought it new, but aged in 2010. And so one of the things with Sitka is when you first play them, they're not very warm. They don't resonate really well. And as they age, they start to open up and relax a little bit. And after about 3 years, the top goldens and the wood opens up. And then they start sounding warmer and warmer. And then by about 5 years, they're just, for the rest of their life, they're just beautiful. But it takes Sitka a while to open up. And so it doesn't happen overnight. Whereas if you said, man, I want a warm tone right off the bat, would go with like Western Red Cedar. And it's not going to be as loud as... let's see if I have some here.
If you need to take a second too.
Yeah, I'm going to get
we can,
going for a second.
We can pause and then.
Yeah, we're keeping you from your livelihood, so.
No, I just want to get Jacob going because he has 2 hours. That's Western Red Cedar. So if you wanted a warmth right off the bat, this is not going to do anything age down the line, but right off the bat it'll be warmer. Not as loud, but really crisp. But yeah, let me get him going.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you can see the the lines in this wood as well, like how it goes from here, and then it's like you can like almost not even see the lines anymore when you get over here.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's just such old growth.
Wow, that's so wild. It's so thin, yeah.
Yeah.
Compared to here, you mean?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, so where do you want to go next? So you have a bunch of questions. Man, prepared.
Prepared, yeah.
Um,
We're ready to nerd out.
I joke that I have fish stick fingers.
What does that
I don't
mean?
have long fingers like a gecko. I have short, square fingers. How would you make a neck for me? What would you
So
do?
one of the reasons I have a lot of demos is a lot of neck sizes. And so do you play with your thumb?
Yes,
Okay.
occasionally. No, mostly not, though.
Okay, so that comes into the equation because like if you're a John Mayer and that thumb comes over the top all the time and you're, instead of doing bar chords, you're using that thumb over the top, that helps with the neck, especially people with shorter fingers. But yeah, it all comes, honestly, I've had people with short little fingers choose big fat necks. And it's like, it's just a personal preference,
Okay,
you know?
just a personal preference.
It really is. So with my demos, I think the only one that's not here is, it's down at San Diego. It's what I call my electric neck. And so it's a really thin.
Oh, yeah, I think I played that
You
one.
might have, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like some people like, they don't necessarily like playing acoustic, but some of their songs are on acoustic guitar, so, but they want the feel of an electric neck. So,
Yeah.
So I offer that. It's a little bit, you know, when you take a neck that thin, so that's all the neck width.
So
up
you
there.
just allow the prospective buyer to play different guitars?
Yeah,
demos
they
and
just
say,
tell
what do
me.
you like?
So
Okay.
they tell me, and I take exact specific measurements, and I carve them all by hand, and so I can get it down to the exact dimensions they want.
Every one of them is carved by hand.
Everyone, yeah. No, I don't use CNC for
Nothing.
anything. No.
Wow.
Yeah. The only thing I use a CNC for is there's an angled slot on the bridge that needs to be very precise, and so I use it for that one slot, and then I use it for the peg head holes on the headstock.
Would you say any of your guitars, or all of your guitars for that matter, have a particular sound? Like, you know, like Fender has a sound and Les Paul has a sound. Would you say Zoe Guitars has this sound?
I think the sound comes from because, you know, like I said, when we start with the top. That's the main thing in their playing style. And then we kind of go from there. And there's about 70 questions we got to go over.
Oh, I want to hear about these.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to ask me all 70 questions. but
No,
like,
it takes a while, but, you know, it's like...
What are you asking?
Oh, man.
What's your
yeah.
favorite color?
Honestly, I've laid out guitars where we pick out all the stuff. I mean, because you're talking binding, purfling, logo color, headstock. I mean, there's so many different things that you can customize and make it your own.
So these
And then-
questions are about the customization of the guitar.
And also playing. You know, what are they going to use it for?
Right,
How do they
right,
play?
right.
What do they play?
What's your
You know?
favorite song?
Yeah,
okay.
are you, well, I mean, you're a blues player, so do you do open tunings?
Not really. but
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Mostly.
yeah, so if you said, man, all my stuff's in open E, I'm like, okay, well, we just went up to about 200 pounds of string tension, so we're going to reinforce the neck a touch more.
Okay. Yeah. Right. on.
Which you don't want to if you don't have to, and because you're just adding either weight or more density to the neck, or actually you're probably creating less density because you're putting in some graphite in there along with the truss rod, and so you're doing some things to the neck that's not natural wood, and so. But, you know, if you're doing all open tunings, you know, open G's or open E's or stuff like that, you're adding more tension, and so we want to accommodate for that because I don't want the neck to bend. You know, one of the greatest inventions is that it's on that red little stand over there. I'll show you more about that. But without a jig like that, to get a perfect low action setup, it's really difficult to do because all the work that you have to do on the frets at the end require the strings to be off. So how do you simulate a neck being pulled like that from string tension with the strings off? And so that jig does that. It allows me to set that neck
That's
like,
pretty cool.
like there's strings on it, and then you can get those frets perfect and just flat and really low action.
So do you ever have a guitar that has a on like a string buzz or the B string won't stay in tune or anything like that? And
Not necessarily tuning, because intonation, I take some great care. It took quite a while to learn intonation, the science behind it, and so it's not so much tuning, but where you find out more is fret buzz sometimes, because like for me, I want my action as low as I can get it. Yeah, and I just love it. But to do that, honestly, it takes great care. And so not only to build it, but to take care of it afterwards. And so you get some amazing players that have issues sometimes, and they have a gig 2 a.m. and they get home, and the next day is 90 degrees, and 12 noon or 1 o'clock they wake up and go, oh, my guitar's out in the car. Oh, and you're just like. All the glues, there's probably like 15 or 18 different types of glues, and they all have different, not melting points, but they start to become somewhat liquid again, so things start to move. And necks, all the woods I use for necks are incredibly straight, stable woods, like that's Honduran mahogany. Wow. But they're straight. You can leave this out in the, maybe not. There's probably going to warp some. But when you get action that's like 1/64th or a half of a 64th of an inch off of that first fret, all it takes is an hour in a hot car to mess that up. Oh, so I quit doing really insanely low setups just because it didn't seem like everybody wants that. And and I'm thinking, God, you know how long it takes to get that? Yeah. And the care and that jig. I can do crappy setups by hand. Yeah. But if you want a low setup, you got to have a certain type of jig, and so I was just kind of blown away at what people want. And also, the higher you get, it changes intonation.
Yes, it does.
So if you've got like 3 or 4 64ths at the first fret, you're bending the string to push it to fret it, and so you're changing the tone. And so to guess the intonation on a bad setup guitar. You're guessing where it's going to be when it's fretted, and it changes all the way up and down the neck. So it's almost impossible to get a perfectly intonated guitar.
Yeah, with a high setup.
Yeah. And I was like, whatever. It's your guitar. You do it whatever you want.
So what do you think about cutaways?
That's another conversation, because you go back to the original science of the vibrating top, and so. How much, in your opinion, does a cutaway take from the percentage of the 100% full body?
That's the question.
Well, so how much do you think? What is it, 15%? I don't know.
It's noticeable.
It is. And so if the top depends on vibrating wood and you're taking 1/7 of that wood away, do you think that's going to affect it?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
And so I built, just for my own ear, I don't have them anymore, but I built identical guitars in, I think, 3 different models. A Super Jumbo, a big old guitar, a Dreadnought, and I think like a triple O orchestra model. And I did the same exact wood for back and sides, same necks, same everything except cutaway and full body. Oh. And I could hear a difference. Yeah. I think it's a no-brainer, and scientifically, if you look at it, it totally makes sense. So. But if you're ripping leads up the neck above the 12th fret, you got to have it. They're awesome.
I admit my J45 has a cutaway.
Yeah.
On your website, you said you do put pickups in your guitars if the client asks for it.
Absolutely.
Can a pickup overcome the cutaway?
I think a sound engineer can.
Yeah.
I do. It's like I have musicians on tour, and sometimes they pick the crappiest pickups, and then they have sound engineers and sound people every night, and they just make them sound amazing. I'm like, man, I love K&K little pure mini pickups. I think they're awesome. Very low feedback and great, man. They're not a mic. They pick up vibration, so they're really good in that sense. But and they sound good. I don't think they sound the best, but they sound good. But you get a sound engineer, and man, that stuff they do and tweak it, and it's just like, how did you get that sound? It's puzzle. It is, and puzzle. Yeah, and so I think that art, that that craft is amazing. You know, and when I see someone working, I just stand back and kind of just observe, and it's like, man, that's amazing. You know, so, and again, you know, it's like working musicians, they want, a lot of times, they want the slotted headstock. You ever, I mean, change strings on a slotted headstock? It's a pain. You know,
you mean so like a classical guitar, it goes through the top.
I think I have any. Nope.
But like a nylon string guitar.
Yeah, so
okay,
yeah,
Wow.
and so
goodness.
you can do that on steel string. That's no problem. But to change strings, like in the middle of, like you break one in the middle of a song, it's like I wouldn't want to deal with that. But working musicians have guitar techs, so they just hand it, and they're quick.
Swap it out.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, it's a whole different world that I'm not used to. One of my favorite sounding guitars, it's not a great build, it's just a quick little thing, because I was doing some different every now and then I'll build a spec guitar that's not necessary, it's never meant for sale, it's just meant to try out a few things, and bracing was one of them, is that mid-jumbo back there, it's like a J45.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's a cedar top.
Wow.
And you typically get a cedar top on a mid-jumbo, and so with some of the harder woods inside, I was able to kind of balance it back out, and man, it's a really crisp, warm sounding guitar. Yeah.
So, do you have a memory of the most demanding client, or the hardest guitar, the most challenging guitar that you've made?
Clients are typically never an issue. Some of them, like I said, like the 70 questions we go over and answer, some people will get through that in like 2 or 3 days, and it blows me away. Some people will take 6 weeks. And because, I mean, you're building something that, you know, you want, it's going to last a while, and it's going to have a certain voice, and you want to be pretty particular about how that voice, and I can kind of direct, I mean, because there's certain nuances that woods do when they're put together, and like I said, you know, the voice of the top, and how the back and sides are going to influence that top. Is it going to be more mid-tones or full bass tonal? Like if you're using Koa, you're losing a lot of the bass part of the tonal range, and so so some people are really particular about having a certain tonal range. And so they take their time and research, and you know, I can direct them to a lot of different sources, but it really comes down to them. And some people are really particular about that final voice and how they want it to sound. And so they're not difficult; they're just really particular. And I actually appreciate that, because they're putting in the time and effort on what that guitar is going to sound like at the end. And so, but as far as difficulty and build, I think the hardest ones are when you have like one-off woods, and like, you know, if you've never done a search, do a search on Google for the tree. Are you familiar with it? I won't tell the story, but there's a great story back in I think it was one of the major makers, Gibson or Martin, back in the 30s. I think they were trying to. This guy was in charge of research and development and trying to find new tone woods as they, you know, drained other sources. And so he went into, I think, the jungles of Belize in the 30s, and they found, way back in the jungle, they found this enormous Honduran mahogany tree. And I think it was like 30 feet across, and it was ancient. And so they cut it down, and it fell down a ravine, 200 feet down a ravine, and they couldn't get it out.
Oh!
And so they left. They never got it. And so in the 70s, this guy was reading some old historical data from one of the builders, and they talked about this legendary tree in Belize back in the jungle, and this team that found it and couldn't get it out. And so he organized a team and put it together, and they went out and searched for it. And it took months. They finally found it, still down in that ravine. And it was just massive. And so they hired 3 or 4 helicopters, and they cut it in 4 pieces, got it up, floated it downriver for a couple days, put it on a barge for a couple days, finally got it to a mill in Honduras, and cut it open, and it was just this tortoise shell mahogany. And so you can still get some of it today.
Wow.
But it's stunning. It's like a wood I've never seen. So you get the sound qualities of mahogany, which is very plain, almost boring, but this tortoise shell look, and you got to look it up. It's just stunning wood. But if someone came to me and said, you know, I want the tree, I said, great, I'll find it, and you can get it for about $6,000. And so it's just the 2 back pieces and the 2 side pieces. But man, bending something like that
Mm-hmm.
and hoping it comes out is a little sketch.
Does anybody ever bring you anything like they say this was my grandfather's barn or something like that? Or
no, they typically want a certain type of wood, like that cowrie
Yeah.
wood from a recent client, and
It's
so
about
I had
the
to find
sound.
that. What's that?
It's about the sound.
Yeah.
Well, for him it wasn't. He's just he's a really good guy, but not like a pro player, not even like a medium player. He knows some chords enough to be dangerous, and for him it was more about the story, and unfortunately, he'd lost a son, and this guitar was a memorial for his son, and so it was more about the story, of that wood, and.
Well, that brings me to one of my questions. When does one know when they're worthy of one of your guitars?
Oh, I don't know. I can't answer that. Man, that's a tough one. I don't know. I would hope that they have some sense of art, some sense of heirloom. That it's not a $500 Takamine. I had one. I loved it. It was one of my favorite guitars. But it's not that, and so.
This is more part of the family and heirloom.
Yeah, and a personal thing. Honestly, in my life, everybody has it. The ups and downs of life and trauma and loss and all that.
Oh, yeah.
And on some of my worst days, what I reached for was one of those. Yeah. And they become kind of a friend. And it's like I built one for a guy, and it turned out really. I was very proud of the guitar, and about a couple weeks after the delivery, I checked in and I was like, "So how's it going? What do you think?" Because I hadn't heard anything. And, if you don't hear anything, you're like, "Dang, man, did I miss? Did I screw up?" And it was actually probably 3 or 4 weeks later. I finally couldn't take it anymore, and I called him up and said, "Hey, man, how's it going? What do you think?" He's like, I don't know." He goes, "It's a new friend, and we're still getting to know each other." And I'm like, whoa, he's just taking it way deeper levels than I ever did. But I get it. I totally understood the way he was expressing that it was a new friend and they were getting to know each other. And I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes, you get clients like that, and I think it's cool. I can't necessarily relate to that level, but I can relate to grabbing it on a bad day and strumming a few chords, and, so.
I love that answer.
Yeah.
That's A-roll right there. That's a great answer.
Well,
I got chills. The hair
it
standing
did
up on my
me
arms,
too when he
man.
told me, and it made me think that it's like, these are really important to people.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, Evan, do you have a favorite guitar?
Yeah.
That if you lost it, what would it do to you?
Oh, it would just break my heart.
Me, yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, my two guitars that I play the most, I don't think I could pick between them, because they're just like, so much of my career is like based on those guitars, and so much of how I've grown as an artist and just as a person, the things that I've struggled with, like learning how to play different chords and just sitting there and trying to figure out how to play, like adding different notes in, like both of my guitars that I just love with all my heart. I would like feel such an immense loss of all of that love and time. And, I've also been so lucky to have had them for so many years that, like, as you were saying, the wood opening up, like
They change.
guitars are also they don't depreciate, like they can if you're just, wrecking them.
Yeah.
But like, this is something that it's only getting better, and it is only growing with you. It becomes like an extension of yourself. And it would just wreck me.
Yeah, me too. And some people take that to really great depths. And, it's like I can relate to it to a certain degree because, when we were going around the world at one point and I was giving guitars away, but there was one guitar that was tough to give away because I had taken it, 3 or 4 or 5 continents and a lot of different countries. And I had signatures from people all over this thing. And I finally gave it away, and it took me I was like, why did I do that? I got on the plane going home going, that was stupid. And then I go, no, that guy really appreciated it. And he still has it to this day in Cambodia. And I was like, but some days, man, I was like, dang it, I wish I had that guitar back, But he, man, it's like, life and death to him. It was a treasure. So.
I was telling Cato that if my house were on fire and I ran in to get one thing, I would grab my Yamaha Dreadnought that I got when I was 16 years old. It's now, 47 years old, just because I've had it so long and I love it and it sounds great. Like you say, the older
you go through stuff with those things,
Yeah.
and they start to become this emotional bond. You know,
So how many guitars do you think you've built?
Oh boy, it's like some people keep the sound hole, and I started doing that recently. But that, so they would put them on a ring, because when you cut out the sound hole on the board, that's a finished guitar. I don't know, I lost count, and so I've only started counting recently, and so if I had to guess, I'd say a few hundred. I don't know.
Okay, more than 100 guitars.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Everyone.
And some of them are hanging up back here because they were wrecks, in the beginning. It's like you wreck one like 30 years ago. You start one and you wreck it like 3 steps in. You're like, I know what I did wrong. And you start a new one. And you get like 10 steps in and you wreck that one. And you're like, dang, I know what I did wrong. Okay, I start another one. And you start another one. You get like 30 steps in and wreck that one. But you finally get through one. But I have a lot of the old antiques skeletons up just to remind me of where I came from.
Learning experience, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So, can you tell us what was the most expensive guitar you made?
No, because they all differ, and a lot of times I don't think they would want that price out. Yeah,
I figured.
Unfortunately,
yeah.
I don't do so. If you came to me and we built a guitar and we went through all the questions and I learned what kind of player you are and what kind of neck, and a lot of that stuff doesn't necessarily change the price. Mm-hmm. The things that change the price are if you say, I want the tree.
Right.
Or I want museum quality flamed koa that's figured. Mm-hmm. And so now you're not getting a better sounding guitar, you're just upping the ante on the aesthetics of the guitar. And say, so you want flamed koa. Well, now you're probably talking cost of a guitar, you're probably getting upwards of $3,000 now, just for the cost, raw cost. And if you say, I want a vine inlay on my fretboard with my initials.
Wow.
And so all of that, so you've taken not only the time and the effort, so, if you say I want abalone and mother of pearl, and I want my initials in this vine, you're probably talking about 3 months of inlay just on the fretboard. Wow. And that takes time, and so is it going to sound any better? Nope. It's not going to play any better, sound any better, but it's just aesthetically going to be over the top. Yeah. And honestly, some of that is kind of gaudy. Mm-hmm. It's not for me. Wants it. Yeah. I'm not going to get in an argument over art and what people think art is, because like Sally and I, we'll go to wood shops and go in there for hours and just go, look at this piece, look at this piece. It's just every piece is different. So
only had a couple more that I wanted to check off. One was tell us about your longest guitar project. In other words, how long did it normally? How long did it take to make a guitar? Average, and then what's the
really? I mean, typically it's like a fairly normal, easy build that's going to be a really good guitar is probably 2 or 3 weeks in the construction part, and then probably 2 weeks finishing.
Really? That's way faster than I thought.
Well, I mean, that's straight working on it. That's no other projects. That's that guitar, and so and there's no crazy inlays. They're probably abalone dots or something like that. But no, you can crank through one fairly good if you have everything that you need, all the supplies and everything, and it's a fairly straightforward build.
So if I called you and said I want a custom guitar, can I have it by Christmas or Easter? You'd probably say yeah.
It's possible, yeah, for sure. Okay. But then we sit down and then you start changing your mind and you want the inlay on the fretboard with a vine and angels and your initials weaved in there, and then we go, okay, now we're back to maybe next summer.
So that's why I wanted to ask you about the hardest, most challenging.
I think a lot of times it's changes in the middle of the build where the client decides to go a different route. And so back again to the recent build, I wish I had it here, is he wanted his son's initials in the fretboard. But he didn't come up with that idea until about halfway through the build. And I was like, okay, that's no problem. But all of my abalone comes from Vietnam. And with COVID, they're just getting back up to speed. And so so I called the guy, he's in Portland, the distributor. I said, hey, you know, this is the name of the guitar he wants to put on the fretboard. And I used to cut out all of that stuff and just get the mass stuff, but it just takes too long, and it actually adds to the cost of the guitar. So I just let them do it. They do a way better job than I do at cutting shell. And so he said it would take about 10 days to get, and it ended up taking 3 months to get. And so, you know, in the meantime, the guitar is just stopped, you know. So it's really things like that. And once I start on a guitar, I hate to stop it. You get in a flow, and, you know, it's like I have a build, and it's going on right now, and I had to stop and work on something else, and I came back to it, and I thinned down the sides. And I thought I thinned down the sides, and so and I didn't, and I went to bend, and I was like, oh no, I'm bending sides that are thicker than they should have been, and thankfully they were only like 1/100 of an inch, and so but it bent beautifully, and and it's going to come out, and it's going to be that guitar is going to have a lot of sustain by accident. Yeah. So it's a really good mistake, and so I'm kind of glad I did it because I know the extent of how much I can bend now. So I just upped the temperature a little bit. I realized that halfway through the bend, and I was like, oh no. And so I made some adjustments, and it bent beautifully. Great. It's going to turn out to be a good mistake. You know, it's like I try to be a stoic, you know, in some of this stuff, and like everything happens for a reason. And so I think that might have happened for a reason. So that client's in Chicago. I think she's going to be pretty happy at the tone that she's going to get out of this guitar. And it was totally accident. You know, I was like, dang it. It was all because I got halted and had to focus in a different direction. Yeah.
Do you think you could show us some of the tools you use and just explain what they do?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about your tools.
That's the build that was a little too thick. And this Granadillo just bent beautifully, but it's typically thicker, about 1/100th or 200ths thicker than I normally go. But honestly, if you can bend wood that thick, it's going to be a better guitar. The problem is bending wood that thick, you know, it just breaks sometimes. And so I was able to make some adjustments and got it to come out. So it's going to be a cool little guitar.
That's cool.
You know, there's so many, like this is just to put a curve on the fret wire. You know, because the fret wire, you know, when it gets, you know, glued into the fretboard's curved. So this particular one, I think, is a 16-inch radius. And so the fret wire has to be arched like that as well. You know, there's just so many little jigs. That's just for drilling holes on slot-headed guitars for the tuners. Wow. Gluing, you know, it's a bridge cull, so it glues bridges onto the top, and so it's just a way to apply pressure. There's just so many little tools that just do one thing, you know, in an entire build, and they're kind of all over the place. You know, that does one thing. That just drills the side markers for fret marking. Oh, you know? Look at that! That's all it does. It's one little tiny thing, you know. So this is one of the most important tools. So this does the intonation and tells you exactly where to set the bridge and but there's a ton of little tools like that.
And you cut the soundboard out with a handsaw or a bandsaw, or?
So if we can get the wood, so you can see I just glued this up. So these are 2 pieces, and so it's glued back together. So it's going to come out like that. So this is Jacob's guitar, and so he's just about to start bracing it. And so he just thickness sanded this. So this is the rosette he decided on, and so he just thickness sanded it to spec. So that's how thick the final soundboard's going to be. And now we're going to start bracing. Well, we got to cut out the sound hole real quick. And
you cut that out by hand?
Oh, it just, I mean, that's another little
We have
tiny
like a
tool.
circular saw or something.
No, it's just a little Dremel.
Oh, wow. Okay,
I
that's
see,
cool.
like a cutting Dremel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like a rudder.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can do it, but that's just one way. And so I think a lot of these things, it's like anything else, there's probably 15, 20 different ways you can do it, and everyone has their own specific way they like doing things. And so that just is easiest for me.
Wow.
But yeah, so back to your question. So this typically comes in just a big, thick piece of wood, and we take it on the bandsaw over there and just cut off thin slices, and then fold it out. So that's called book matching. So these two used to be together like that.
So they had identical or
Exactly.
almost identical.
Yeah, so you can see this light strip there is the same there because it used to be like that. So that's book matching. So you open it up, glue it back together, and then start bracing it to make it strong. There are pieces where, like I said, that 1440 BC piece of wood I have that's, right over here is the growth rings is 1440 BC, and over here is like 1490 AD.
Wow.
And so it's one solid piece. And so talk about a story on a guitar.
No kidding.
So you put that with that Cowrie wood that's 52,000 years old, and now your whole guitar is collectively 53, 4,000 years old.
Wow. Okay.
Cool.
So yes, I mean there's just hand tools everywhere and sharp things and sharp chisels and
So you still use hand chisels?
yeah, that's what Jacob will be running into next, is shaping his braces on the back of the guitar. So these are,
Everything has to be so precise.
Yeah.
Like it's easier to do things by hand, I would
think,
assume.
well, I mean,
Like-
unless you're doing mass production.
Well,
you know?
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
if I was producing 900 guitars a day, like Taylor does,
Of
I mean, I
course.
definitely have a ton of CNC machines,
Yeah.
And but that's what the braces start out like, and then they get shaped and. So
Yeah.
that's old growth Sitka, and you can see on
Very,
end it's
yeah.
incredibly stiff.
Very stiff.
Yeah.
And light.
Yeah, exactly,
And-
which
and
is
you
key
like-
because it has to vibrate.
And you like making a light guitar. You think a light guitar is better than a heavy guitar?
Well, some of the heaviness comes from the tuners, what you do in the neck. So I've had all different weights, and then the electronics can add quite a bit. I think it really comes down to the body drum. I mean, I think I can pick this up. Yeah. I mean, this is Granadillo, and it's known for a tap tone. So that's another thing. Like, one of the questions, like, you're playing, do you tap a lot? So Granadillo is known for a tap tone. So when you put Granadillo on this, it's like a drum. And so, man, you can get some cool stuff going on when you're playing. I don't do a lot of tap toning. That's an art.
Yeah.
I love that sound.
Yeah,
That's
that Granadillo is a great wood for tap tone.
Yeah, I was telling them about all the different woods that you showed, Raina and I, when
Oh yeah.
it was just
Yeah, we can look at some of those.
so exciting.
So bending station, this is where I bend everything. So all my molds down there, different types of molds, cutaways, full bodies, all kinds of stuff.
There it says J45 on it.
Yep. So that's a
body style?
mid jumbo.
Yeah.
Mid jumbo, yeah.
Wow.
You can do it. So those are kind of all the templates I have for the tops and backs up there. So the only one that I wouldn't recommend on a cutaway is the parlor up there. It's so tiny to begin with, and so you take away a portion of that parlor's top, you have nothing left.
So tell us about all this.
So woods are kind of rated by number of A's they have. So this is flamed maple. Very hard, great wood, especially for bigger guitars like a J45 or a SJ200. Great wood because it's hard. It's not super dense, and so it kind of counteracts the big bodies with all the bass you get. This brings treble back into it, and so again, it flavors the top. But that's what it does. It brings treble back into wood. So if we use this on a parlor, then it's going to be all treble. But this would be like a single or double A. Some nice flame. And so one of the ways you can see how it's going to finish is just to spray some water on it.
Oh, yeah.
And so you can
Look
kind
at
of
that.
start seeing what it looks like.
Yeah.
So it becomes, you know, just
The
almost 3D.
shine.
So that would be like a single or double A. But here's a 4A. So if you say I want to flame maple, but I want to make it cheap, these two are going to sound exactly the same, but you can see the coloring difference, the great flame, but this would be a 4A flame. And so it's just, the color is just amazing up and down, and the flame is just ridiculous.
Oh, look at that three-dimensionality.
Amazing.
Of that. That's crazy.
Cool.
Looks like a wrinkled blanket.
So cost of a guitar, going to sound exactly the same, but this one's going to probably be at least a couple $100 more just because of that quality of wood.
Wow.
Here's another favorite wood. I think this is like a 3A. So this is called quilted maple. So when you put water on this,
Wow.
you can see it just
That's
comes
beautiful.
alive.
It looks like the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, it's just rippled, just
Look
Yeah,
at
it
that.
does look like that.
And so this is like a 3A back and sides. And I think
Just blows my mind.
This is so cool.
Yeah, so I was like, we need to do this. I think.
Yeah,
Look at
this
the
is cool.
three-dimensionality of that. It looks like you're looking down on a mountain range.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
I have a 4A quilt somewhere. I just wanted you to see the difference in woods. Again, the sound is not going to be the same, but the quilting in the 4A is way tighter and just even more depth. And so some of my other favorite woods a lot of them are coming out of Africa now. Like mahogany is a great wood. It's one of the most recorded combinations. I don't think I have one here. It's all that cheap one, that junker I have up front is Sitka top with mahogany back and sides Honduran. That's the most recorded combination of acoustic guitars in history of recording. And so, but now they're coming, but mahogany is fairly boring. I mean, like here, this is my Honduran mahogany. Incredible wood. Look how straight it is. I mean, there's really not a whole lot of character to it.
Oh, yeah.
It's just straight grain. Well, this is mahogany, but it's called sapele, and it's out of Africa. So same tonal qualities as mahogany, but you got all this like curly wood and just flame to it. And then this is another one. So this is called African ribbon stripe mahogany, and it's like flame. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I like that one.
Yeah.
Zebra stripes.
Yeah, African ribbon stripe mahogany. Yeah, so a lot of cool stuff. I think I've got one building right now. Another wood out of Africa called Paduk. So if you like a red guitar, it's a great, really, really hard wood for bigger bodied guitars. But not everyone likes red guitars. So this one is called Zitacote. And so this comes out of the jungles, I think in Central America.
That's gorgeous.
And so, man, these stripes just turn black and just, I mean, it doesn't have the flame and figuring, but it's just such a unique wood. And really good sounding wood. Great tap tone and full tonal range. So, I mean, there's so many different types of tone wood you can go. Like, you know, if you tap tone, and you know, it comes down to the body size too. You know, it's like if you say, oh, I want a huge jumbo, well, that's going to leave out things like mahogany. We're going to throw that out the window because that's going to make more bass on an already bassy instrument. So no mahogany. So you'd probably be something like maple, Zitacote, Paduk. Now the original Gibson Super Jumbos were all out of maple. And it was for a reason, because they brought that big bassy instrument back into the tonal range and had more treble. So that maple's going to allow that big body to have more treble.
What was that parlor made out there? The one.
Oh, so that was a test guitar. So not a test, but I built it for shows just to educate. And I think I was about to tell you, and I went into the VA theme because. So one of the guys brought in. So we have this group come in, and we give them tours of the shop, and we try to get guitars a couple times a year into their hands. So I donate a couple guitars to the VA, the strings organization. And but they come in probably 3 or 4 times a year, and we do tours, and we sit and jam and talk and just have a great time. And one of the guys that came in, an older Vietnam vet, and really good guy, and after we started talking about what we talked about of the growth rings and the new growth versus the old growth, and so what I didn't tell you is like that new growth top that is on that parlor, it's like a $12 top. New growth is very inexpensive, but the problem is you have to over brace it because of that string tension, because it's a weaker top. Now you have to over brace it. Well, anytime you over brace an instrument, you're taking that bass to treble tonal range and compressing it because it's over braced because of the weak wood. So you don't want to use new growth wood. It's weak, has to be over braced. So we started talking about that, and I told him that, you know, the top on that particular car, it's fine. It sounds great. If I had it next to an old growth top, you'd hear the difference, and there is a difference. But it's fine. It's a good guitar, and you know, with a final setup, it's going to play great. But it was cheap. It was cheap to build. It's American cherry, and so the back and sides were $50. That top was $12. If I would have made that with an old growth top, you would have easily 5-6 times. And I'll show you some of those woods on why. And so we started, I was just trying to just educate on anytime you go, you find a great, you know, pawn shop deal, and you see a guitar, how to identify old growth wood and why it's so valuable and why it's so important. And so after we talked for a couple of hours, they all brought their guitars to play. So we always do a jam session afterwards. And he brought up his guitar and he goes, I won't tell you what make it was, but he said, so I spent $7 grand on this. Bought it at Guitar Center. I'm like, okay. He goes, look at this top. And it was like the top on the parlor. And I'm like, oh. And you could see the look on his eyes that he knew we got, not taken, but he didn't know what he bought and what to look for. Yeah. And he was like, I spent a lot of money on this guitar for a cheap top. I'm like, that wasn't my intention. I was trying to educate, you know, that he had already, you know, been to that, you know, and bought it, and you know, so yeah, sometimes you just want to know what you're looking at before you go spend a lot of money. You know, you see a big name on it, and you're like, oh, they're going to do me right. And it's not that they're not. You know, honestly, if any of those big makers that produce 1,000 guitars a day, if they're using old growth, we'd be out of it by next year. You know, it'd be gone. You know, and so they can't. So it's only on those high-end guitars. But man, it's hard to see someone who spent a lot of money, who doesn't really have a lot of money, on a guitar that they thought was just off over the top, you know, quality tone woods. And it wasn't so much the case. And so he was kind of bummed about that. But that's kind of why I built that guitar, just to take the shows and show the difference between new growth and old growth, and why it's so important.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And so when you get to, so again, tone woods are rated by the A system, you know, single A, double A, triple A, quadruple A. And so every now and then on Sitka trees, I don't know if it's 1 in 50 or 1 in 100, they cut it open and it has these it's called bear claw spruce. Did I show you any of that? On the guitar that you liked up there, look at the top. It has these marks in it, and it looks like a bear claw scratched it. And so the Sitka, the indigenous Native Americans named it bear claw spruce because it looks like it was scratched by a bear. So this is very light. If I open this up, you can see it.
I can see it.
It's not a lot though. So this would be, you see those white marks? Yeah. Some of them, they're everywhere. And so this would be, it's an old growth top. You can see the old growth, but it has some discoloration there. It goes from kind of white down to almost like a brownish color. So that's going to degrade this top down to probably a 2 or 3A because of that coloration variance and not a lot of figuring with the bear claw. So this would probably be a 2A, 3A top. Great top. and it's old growth. But
sound is fine, but aesthetics are
it's going to be perfectly sound fine. Yeah. But then you get like this top. So this is an old growth Sitka top. So here, let's go to the masters. So there's one above the quadruple A, and that's master. And so that means that it's insanely, I mean, you can't even count those growth rings. So insanely old growth tree, and the color's consistent. There's no knots, there's no inconsistent stripes like that. So this color, when you put it together on a top, it's just going to be white across, and it's going to look like one piece. So incredibly high grade, old growth top with perfect coloring. And so that's what makes it a mastered grade so, depending on the builder, if James Olson had this and he put it on his guitar, it'd be a $30,000 guitar. Wow.
Wow.
And it's, so there's definitely different qualities of woods, and you can get by, if you want a great sounding guitar but don't want to spend the money, and then we get an old growth 2 or 3A that has some discoloration, but it's going to still sound amazing. Sometimes the cost of the guitar isn't necessarily indicative of the tone.
That's the most important thing we've heard today.
Because it comes down, I mean, like some of these woods, especially this bear claw stuff, it's one of a kind.
Yeah.
I mean, like, look at that top out there on that dreadnought, and there's not another one like it in the world. And that's the cool thing about using bear claws. It doesn't degrade the sound at all. It just increases the uniqueness and the one-off of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that gives people a choice. They can come in here and say, "Hey, I want a really good sounding guitar." But
there's ways to cut.
But let's cut the expense, or you could come in here and say, "I want the most beautiful, artistic, rarest wood you can find," and the sound won't be that much difference, but the aesthetic
the uniqueness of it is going to be over the top. Yeah. There won't be another piece of wood like it. Yeah. But if someone said, "Hey, I want to build the best sounding guitar with new growth wood," and I'm like, it's not my deal. It's pointless. I mean, why go to all that trouble for building a guitar for 6 weeks with junk wood? When we still can get old growth.
That parlor.
Yeah, this is the parlor.
Incredible. It just sounded amazing. It sounded amplified.
It did.
I love like the little things like this headstock. You get like this little extra color from the wood. Like it's not a perfect just like painted headstock.
Yeah,
like,
that's nice.
This is real.
But that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and also like this, the grain on the sides, like having this other color come in down here. It's just gorgeous.
So he does put a little strap.
Yeah, I think you can probably ask depending on how. Like I don't like to have my strap up at my neck. So.
No, I put a strap knob on my J45, and then I realized it gets in the way of my trying to get down there.
Oh, really?
So I took it out, but I have the screw and I can put it back in.
Yeah.
Sean Weimer.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for your generosity and your time
absolutely.
today.
No,
it's amazing meeting you.
Yeah, it was a really cool conversation. I could talk about this stuff all day long.
And we appreciate you taking the time out. Tell us about your website and the social media that you're on.
Yeah, so www.zoe-guitars.com. Yep, so it's all there, and my number's on there, my personal cell phone's on there. I guess that's not great, but call, talk. Yeah, I love the conversations. It drives my wife's nuts, but I actually talk people out of guitars sometimes because it's just not for them. And she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "It's not for them, They need a $1,500 just production guitar. That's where they should be." And so I talk a lot of people out of guitars, unfortunately. So I don't want to sell someone that's not where they're at in life.
Well, this has been an amazing experience for us, and quite an education, and I'm going to go find a way to afford one of your guitars.
No, we'll make it work. We'll make it work.
Okay.
Thank
nice
you.
meeting you all.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
just like in love with this melody.
Last night.
Yeah. I don't think I could tell you any of the words, but I just love this. I mean, they're in my notebook, but I don't. Yeah, my singing is not the important part of today. So.